in the room.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I am so sorry. That took a lot longer than we thought it was going to. We ran into an issue with our WebEx technical issue. So sorry. And I do think we're going to have a couple of people, panelists joining us but we're going to start to not have you wait any longer. And for those who can stay on a little bit later, maybe we can, if you can stay a little bit later, and I believe some of our panelists are able to also, then that way we won't be super rushed to end right at 7. But if you have to go, we understand. So I'm going to introduce myself and the panelists we have here, just kind of set things, set the direction for us. I'm Nicole Golden, the Executive Director of Texas Gun Sense. We're a state-based organization here and we are unwavering in our commitment to end gun violence. We advance safer gun laws at the legislature. We work to build and improve safe gun culture in Texas. And we do educational events like this one. So thank you for being here with us. And I do want to just, say that our conversation tonight touches on the often grim reality of school safety in Texas. We're going to talk about existing policies that prevent or worsen gun violence in our schools and steps we can all take to make our schools safer for students and educators. And of course, I know it's on all of your minds that just today in Minnesota, there was a horrific shooting. I've barely been able to read the news myself. I have to really kind of, prepare myself for it because I'm also a parent and I send my kids to school every day, just like so many of you. And, I know we all have that, that feeling of dread and heartbreak for those families. And we know what it feels like to witness things like that. We know what it feels like to be scared in our own communities. We in Texas really know what it's like to see those tragedies impact our communities and our neighbors and our friends. I think a lot about the friends we've made from Robb Elementary and those parents we've gotten to know really well. And I think about what I know they've gone through and how people in Minnesota are experiencing that same horrible sense of grief and loss and fear. And so, but it does, it is why we do the work that we do to prevent that from happening anywhere, including in our state of Texas. And so hope you're all taking care of yourselves. And I know it hits close to home. I'm going to just introduce our panelists. We have, like I said, a couple of them here, some of them still on their way. We have Lynn Boswell, who's the president of the Austin ISD Board of Trustees. District 5 is what she represents. And thank you, Lynn, for coming.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. We have Carrie Griffith, who's the Government Relations and Policy Specialist with the Texas State Teachers Association and a really important partner in our work at the legislature, and a member of our coalition. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Sure. And I think our call-in user is Dr. Brian Williams, who is a USAF veteran, a trauma surgeon, an award-winning author of an amazing book, and a gun violence prevention advocate. Welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you for inviting me, Nicole.
Of course. We are hoping that Ayan Moladina, who is another incredible coalition partner, he's the federal policy director with Students Engaged in Advancing Texas, which we also call SEAT. Hopefully he will get here. And our moderator was going to be Ethan Sullivan on our staff, but I am taking over for him until he gets here. I'm going to just go ahead and ask again, thank you for all the guests who are watching. And we'll have some time at the end for you to put some questions in the chat for our panelists. First question, this is to all of you. What does back to school season mean in the context of safety, both for students, educators, and communities? And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to point to you and go in order. So Lynn, I'm going to start with you first.
Sure. I think when we talk to back to school and we hear the words school and safety together, where I think many people's heads go first are school shootings. And we saw that today, why that needs to be one of the things we absolutely consider I think it is one of the things the state is very heavily considering and not considering a lot of the other things that we know our students face. We have to really be thinking about safety. When we use that word, we're capturing the full spectrum of our students' experience and our educators and our families' experience. We know a lot of the gun violence students experience happens in our community, and our students are sometimes victims, sometimes perpetrators, sometimes witnesses, sometimes impacted by suicide or by someone close to them experiencing that kind of violence. We need to be talking about mental health, about bullying, about really the whole package.
Hmm.
And I think back to school is a time to really focus on that, and a time to really start listening to our students and our educators and our families about what makes them feel safe and what isn't making them feel safe in this moment.
Yeah, thank you. Good answer. Dr. Williams, I'm going to send it over to you and ask you the same question. What does back to school season mean in the context of safety for our all of those in our school community?
Yes, absolutely. For me, it's evolved over the last 10, 15 years. I just just put some context. I do have a 14-year-old daughter who just began high school, freshman this year, and for the longest time I thought about bullying and digital safety and social media, things like that. But certainly, gun violence prevention has been at the top of the list for the better part of a decade when she started doing her school lockdown drills. And I just thought, how sad is that? That that's what we've come to as a country. And considering my role as a trauma surgeon and seeing what the impact of gun violence does to bodies and families and communities, to know that that is a realistic possibility for her and that she's training for that as part of her education is something I think about what it means for her classmates, and the teachers that are trying to guide their education. So these are all things that I think about nonstop, um, just as a parent and as a citizen beyond my role as a healthcare provider.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. I feel you on that. I have high schoolers as well. Um, Carrie, what does back to school season mean to you in the context of safety?
Yeah, so, I sort of speak as a former teacher and someone who advocates for teachers across the state, and also as a parent with three daughters in Texas public schools. And so I think for all of these roles, our greatest feeling is just uncertainty. We're uncertain both inside and outside of schools. And I think that that's you know, informed and increasing because of our growing mistrust in our state. We unfortunately, all issues related to education, there's growing mistrust in our state, and this certainly includes school safety. There's a clear will by the state of Texas to expand firearms both in communities and in schools, and there's continued inaction in passing common sense gun laws.
Hmm.
So, TSTA, the Texas State Teachers Association, we're not categorically opposed to having peace officers on campuses or at school sponsored events, but we just believe that this should be a local decision, something that the community and their elected officials decide to do. But we also maintain that these individuals, if it's so chosen that they're there, that they have adequate training and that they're fully trained law enforcement officers. And what we're seeing with the state is that both of these conditions are being stripped. Um, Districts are now required to have an armed presence, so we're losing local control. And at the same time, the protections around who we're permitting to be in this role are diminishing. Joe Blow off the street can have a firearm on campuses. And then also just, and I speak, I think mostly as a mom, but also as a teacher and, someone who works with teachers. I think that there's a real tension between the safety measures that we all feel we need and want on some level and the compromised sense of community. I mean, we don't walk our kids to classrooms anymore, and that's a loss. We don't This is impacting the relationship that families have with teachers and that teachers have with families, and that's detrimental to student learning, and that's a real loss. And so
Hmm.
these are the things that I think of when I think of sort of where we are with school safety.
Yeah. I hear all of that. And I'm going to invite Ayan, who is another one of our call-in users, to answer the same question. And by the way, before we start, you guys, we are so sorry about the technical problems. I don't know what to tell you. We're working on it. We are embarrassed and we're sorry. And it's such a pain for all of you trying to get to audio, get to video. And it looks like the webcast keeps going in and out. And then we have a couple of our panelists who couldn't get in by video, and I'm really sorry. But thank you for being here. Ayan, my friend, what does back to school season mean to you in the context of safety, both for students, educators, and communities? Uh-oh. Maybe he's not fully here yet. I'm going to send a question. Jan, we're going to wait on you. I'm going to send a question over to you. This is specifically for you, Lynn. As a school board trustee, what steps do you see districts taking or needing to take to address safety without compromising student well-being and trust?
I think Carrie's point that we have a lot of very visible hardening requirements that are coming from the state. The state is giving us a very long list of things we have to do. We have to fence campuses. We have to have, 2 layers of doors, locked doors on campuses. We have to have officers on campuses carrying weapons. And, that makes some people feel safe, makes some people feel a lot less safe. And at the same time, a lot of people recognize that we aren't doing a lot of other things that could mitigate the need for that kind of hardening. And hardening is not going to be the answer. And it is interfering with students' sense of safety often, where an officer doesn't feel safe and welcoming to a lot of people, families, a lot of our students, a lot of our staff. We know that it's distracting from a lot of other things that could help us be safer and help it be more effective. We also know that it is damaging that sense of community, that our schools do not feel welcoming. Our schools belong to our community. They don't feel like they belong to our community. All of this has a real impact, and relationships are a huge part of what creates real safety in all of the ways, not just from physical violence, but all the other kinds of safety that we really want and need to create the learning environment, the campus community that we deserve and need and want for all of our kids. As a mom, that's important to me. As a trustee, that's important to me. And I think
Right.
within that, we can ensure that our staff welcomes people. We leave our campuses open on the weekends and in the evening to make sure that our community can continue to use them, continues to see them as their spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of training that we do with our police force in Austin ISD. Our chief of police was our lead mental health officer. And we really approach it with that perspective. They have to be there, but how can they be there as the most positive thing they can be, the most relational thing they can be? And I think just approaching our requirements and then advocacy. We continue talking about all the other things that can be done. I think the safe storage notification is a really important step. I really appreciate the work that Texas Gun Sense did. That you talk about common sense.
Mm-hmm.
That was common sense. It was bipartisan. It was all the things we want to be. And I think we need to be sure as a state that it has real teeth. And I think within our districts, we need to be sure we're making that meaningful, even if the state doesn't have big requirements for it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to touch on, thank you for mentioning the secure storage work. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later when we cover some of the legislative progress and challenges that we've encountered. Ayan, since you made it, thank you, and I'm sorry. I'm going to go directly to a question for you that's meant for you specifically. As a youth leader working in the policy space, what are young people asking for or hoping for when it comes to school safety and gun violence prevention?
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad I finally made it on. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. I would hope, I would hope as a young person that I would be able to handle technology, but I guess I am not as young as I claim to be. But thank you for having me. And I'll say this, look, especially after what happened today, w- there is no there is no young person in this world that doesn't feel strongly about this issue. This is one issue that unites all young people. watching an interview on the news of a 10-year-old, and he said that his friend, another 10-year-old, saved his life because when the shooter came into the church, the other 10-year-old lied flat on top of the other child and took the bullet for him. He took a bullet for his friend. That, I mean, that's just, I can't even comprehend that. A 10-year-old having to take a bullet for another child, like, that is just inexcusable. And for people in power to just be saying that this is solely a mental health issue, or and don't get me wrong, I'm a mental health activist. I love mental health, but at the end of the day, it's not just mental health, right? We have to agree that the problem is the guns. And so, and young people know that. I hear from my peers every day that we don't want to be growing up in a generation where lockdown drills are normal. I mean, I talk about this a lot about how I've been coming since kindergarten. We've been having lockdown drills, and I used to have nightmares about my best friends getting shot. That's not normal, right? Like, I would wake up in the middle of the night crying because I thought someone was banging on the door like they do in the drills. That's not normal. We have made this the norm where it shouldn't have to be. And I think when we talk about what the Texas legislature has done with various quote unquote school safety bills, what they want to do is more drills, more magnetometers, more school resource officers, and a lot of these things, which some of them in some cases maybe can be beneficial. The studies are yet to show, but in many cases we know that most of them are not effective, and don't drive down school gun violence. And so at the heart of it, what young people are hoping for is the chance really to just learn in classrooms without fear, to attend football games, graduations, and dances without wondering if they'll be safe, right? I mean, I shouldn't have to talk to my teacher and her tell me on a daily basis that she's thinking about how we as a class can exit the school, thinking about how we can evacuate in moments of crisis. I remember those conversations in fourth grade and eighth grade. I don't remember anything else from elementary school besides those conversations about how we exit the school and about how if there's someone with a gun who walks into our classroom, what are you supposed to do? That it's not supposed to be that way. So what young people are really asking for is that we change the entire dynamic around how we talk about gun violence prevention in schools, which is a very daunting task, but it's going to require all of us, right? We have school board trustees here, we have teachers, we have parents and community leaders and students. It's going to require all of us, and I think we can't just sit back and say, oh, it's going to be this one thing, it's going to be this one thing. It has to be all of them.
I completely agree, and I love hearing from you. And I think it's so important to have your voice, representing so many students who I know, shouldn't have to live this way and are living this nightmare day to day. My next question is for you, Dr. Williams. From your perspective as a trauma surgeon, how does gun violence affect children and families? It really affect them in day to day, and what should people understand about that lasting impact?
When I think about the impact of gun violence, I really think of three things. One is a physical impact, second is a psychological, and last is the community impact. And I think it's important for the attendees to understand that when I'm talking about this, it is certainly from the perspective of a trauma surgeon who has been dealing with gun violence, but also I served as a health policy advisor for Senator Chris Murphy and was part of crafting and passing the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act after the Uvalde tragedy. So there is policy experience there, and I'm also a survivor. I've had members of my family taken due to gun violence. So all these three things I just discussed, I can speak to from many different angles. So certainly firearms impact the bodies of children and teens in a way that's much more destructive than would for full-grown adults. And they have to deal with the physical scars for much longer. Psychologically, this is the importance of wraparound services. And I just want to call on what Ion talked about, which is mental health, is understand that most people with mental health diagnoses or problems are victims of gun violence, not perpetrators. So that narrative that is amplified by gun rights activists is doing a disservice to saving lives, and it is not the reality. Most are victims, not perpetrators of gun violence. But we need to do a better job of providing mental health services before and after incidents of gun violence. And there's a lot more we need to do in this country and in Texas for that. And lastly, just the community impact, just the ripple effects. We're all feeling that, right? We're here in Texas, but we are somehow impacted by this mass shooting that occurred in Minneapolis. The children were injured, a few adults were injured. That community is suffering. Their parents are feeling this, their friends. We are feeling this. So there are ripple effects from gun violence that can last far beyond the shooting itself. And it's also triggering to many others in this country who have already been victimized or experienced uh, gun violence. So the physical, psychological, and community impacts extend far beyond the location of the shooting, the individuals that are injured, and uh, they extend over time.
Thank you. And I should say, and you're making a great case for this. One of the things we've really wanted to do is to partner with healthcare experts like you, Dr. Williams, because we know that you see the traumatic impact all the time, not just the physical injuries, but like you said, the ripple effect. Thank you for putting it that way. Carrie, this is for you. What are teachers and school staff experiencing when it comes to safety at school, and how does that affect the classroom environment?
Well, I think that we've all sort of touched on this, that we continue to, harden our schools. We continue to pour money into the, the fencing and the locked doors and the security cameras and things. But what we're seeing, number one, is that there is research showing that this, it doesn't necessarily make schools safer, but it does negatively affect students. And then when you look more closely, these heightened security measures are disproportionately used in schools and classrooms with higher percentages of students of color, students with disabilities, and with boys. So things like random sweeps and surveillance cameras and the clear backpacks and metal detectors and things like that, we don't see used in the same manner across all demographics. And so it's reducing the perception of safety, both by students and teachers. And there's a rise in disciplinary actions against students that we are unfairly labeling as unsafe. And then also, Dr. Williams and Ayan both spoke to the school safety drills. That's terrifying. I have a 13-year-old who also had a lockdown drill today. So it's like we're already doing this and they're being raised with this. But some students are experiencing active shooter drills, which TSDA worked hard to kind of tamp down on some of the regulations around those for districts that choose to implement those. But some of our legislators literally were requesting or suggesting that real guns should be used in active shooter drills so that students would be better prepared for the reality of a tragedy. And right, and so schools are just feeling less safe and less connected, like Lynn had said.
Carrie, I didn't even know about that fact that when you were talking about the railguns. I'm just, my mind is exploding with that.
Right. Yeah.
I'm with you, Nicole. That's just absurd.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I
right.
was privileged to be on the witness stand having an argument with a man who was insisting, an elected official who was insisting that there should actually be firearms used in active shooter drills.
Unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable. But I've heard some wild
They're
stuff.
not. It's not permissive, but there are
Right.
elected officials who are who believe that this makes sense, right?
That might do the trick. Right.
Yeah.
Ayan, I'm gonna go back to you and ask you, what lessons have you learned in your student rights advocacy that you think could help guide Texans who want to make a difference locally on this issue, or really other important issues that affect us and our safety?
Well, look, so what we've talked a lot about today is a lot of like, right, is back to school, a lot of the school-based issues, which are governed by people like Lyd Boswell here on the call. And so I think when we talk about making a difference in regards to gun violence prevention, or like you said, any other issue that affects our safety, it really matters going before your city council, before your school board, and testifying and just networking with them and making those connections, because when they have those partnerships with community members and with organizations. I know Austin ISD works a lot with another organization called Lock Arms for Life that does a lot of work on, Nicole, you know, obviously, but for folks who don't know, that do a lot of work on safe storage and providing free access to gun locks. And so I want to make sure that there are those types of partnerships in place for local leaders. So building those connections and knowing that local advocacy is always uh, tends to be a lot more effective than larger scale advocacy. That's just the way it is. People power starts at the local level. And so making sure that we're building coalitions, like I talked about before, that parents, educators, health professionals, students are working together at the local level, and that's what really can make a difference. And that's exactly what, Nicole, you and I did in the past legislative session, right? We brought together all those stakeholders, and we killed so many bad bills. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about that if you haven't already, but you're gonna talk about how we killed a lot of those bad bills, and we need to talk about that more, right? Because conversations, not only about gun violence prevention overall, I say this a lot about suicide prevention, and I think it carries over to this issue as well, is that when we don't talk about the issue, that's when tragedies happen. And so I think if we talk about gun violence prevention more at the local level and talk about why safe storage is important, it'll reach people who need to have those conversations. And so, very similar to suicide prevention of reducing the stigma, I think there's a stigma associated with gun violence prevention as well, in the sense that people don't know how, if you're a gun owner, many of them don't know how to safely own a gun, right? They don't know the importance of securely storing a gun. They don't know that having an unlocked gun in your house can lead to an increased suicide risk for your teenager, right? They don't know these types of things. And so having those conversations and educating, and then also talking about the wins that we've had and how we've been able to kill those bad bills. Because I think when we talk about gun violence prevention, it's, especially in a state like Texas, most people are going to be like, well, it's a lost cause, right? What can you do? I mean, the gun rights people are going to do what they want to do. But at the end of the day, we've done a lot. Nicole, you know this. We've done a lot. There's a lot more that we're gonna do. We have a lot of good things in the works right now, and so we're gonna keep fighting back. But I think people need to know that it's not just, oh, we're gonna keep fighting back. Like, we have won, and we can't forget that. And so we need to keep talking about that. And those stories are the most impactful thing. Whatever issue it is, whether it's education or gun violence prevention, stories are what drive successful policymaking, particularly at the local level. And so, I mean, I share my story with active shooter drills and with suicide in regards to firearms. I share those stories publicly because I think being vulnerable is what's going to save lives. And so I think talking to your local elected officials, sharing your stories, building those connections, and destigmatizing the issue, those are the things that we can do.
Those are great. Those are great answers, and I'm really glad you brought up suicide, because it is so important. And you and I have talked about this a lot. And suicide is the is responsible for the greatest number of firearm deaths. And there's been some um, alarming fluctuations in rates for our youth, particularly in the 10 to 14 age group, in terms of firearm suicide this past year. And so there's a lot we need to talk about in that space. Thank you. This is the same question that's going to be both for you, Lynn, and Carrie. So Lynn, I'll start with you. From the educator and education policy perspective, what policies or practices do you think would truly make our schools safer?
I think the first one is really giving teeth to the safe storage law. We have a great thing in place. We have something we know is bipartisan. We have something we know is achievable, I think, and really not only to make the notification piece of it meaningful, but to make the enforcement part of it meaningful. I think we have room for that. And I think Ayan's point is that, we need to focus on advocacy at every level. I know Ayan is an advocate at not only as part of SEAT, but as an advocate at our district, and in addition, all the way up to his federal work and at the state capitol. That matters, and people will listen, and there's a lot of common ground on these things. I think, something as simple, if you're talking about a policy at your local district, talk to your district, talk to your trustees, talk to your principal about, would it be okay to let parents walk their kids to the classroom door in the morning to help build that community locally? That's a small thing, right? But that's a maybe an easier win than getting restrictions, age limits on purchases of guns, or getting some other things. While we're fighting those fights, we can also do that work locally. And I think rational choices about, how we're supporting student mental health, knowing the stress our students are under. And this is one of the stressors, and really making sure that we're not letting all these conversations about hardening distract us from the fact that we wouldn't have to harden things if we had some more rational laws.
Yeah, really well said. Um, that, we've been so reactive for so long. We need to be preventative. Carrie, same question for you from the educator and education policy perspective.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have to start outside of schools to make schools safe. And so we need to um, continue to fight for laws that keep guns out of the hands of individuals who have no business having guns. And you guys do that so well. And so I'm so appreciative of the partnership that TSTA has with the Coalition for the Prevention of Gun Violence. And so that just really, has to be said. It's like we're in a freezing room and we just keep adding sweaters when we can just turn the heater on, like it's just so common sense. But in terms of policy changes for schools, I think that, first and foremost, there really needs to be a restoration of local control, and how both funding is spent, and just listen to the communities. What are the communities asking for? Because as our communities feel like they're losing input into the school decisions, and a metal detector goes in, or a higher fence goes in, or the doors are locked, or whatever, there's just growing distrust and everything. So just a restoration of local control, both with how monies are spent and decisions that are made, and whether or not to have armed law enforcement. But then just some things that, that we advocate for all kinds of reasons, like, teacher, um, the quality of teacher professionalism and student outcomes and everything. Things like smaller class sizes. I mean, when classes become too large, it is a safety hazard. And um, we're in a situation of, constant expansion of choice policies. We just passed, the voucher law, and we've got, charter schools exploding, and we have, local choice where kids are being segregated. And what's happening is we have these campuses and spaces and classrooms of the left behinds that are much, higher concentrations of the more challenging students. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so you've got large classrooms with more challenging students. And we have a system with extreme stress triggers, right? The accountability and the assessment system. And bill just passed out of both chambers yesterday and today that's going to add more testing and add accountability indicators tied to test results. I mean, we're not doing anyone any favors, and schools are very stressful environments. Um, so, these are some things that may not be directly related to gun violence prevention, but they are certainly indirectly related to the safety of our schools.
Right, looking at it holistically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dr. Williams, what role do you feel healthcare professionals should play in advocating for safer schools and communities, and just it, more broadly for gun violence prevention?
Yeah, first of all, I got to say how grateful I am that you asked me to participate in this panel, because I'm learning a lot, and it just shows the importance of interdisciplinary solutions to this gun violence epidemic. Specifically for healthcare professionals, I think we have an important role in education. I think this goes to what Ayan said about the stories that we share. Like, we have a front row seat to the physical and psychological devastation that gun violence um, contributes to society. So we can share those stories and educate with the stories, but also by combining that with evidence-based solutions, right? This is, a nonpartisan approach to saving lives. So combining our frontline stories with the evidence, but we also need to be part of advocacy efforts. So participating in sessions like this, joining advocacy organizations, and bringing our healthcare lens to the solutions, and getting beyond the hospital. So community engagement is important as well, because it's easy for us to remain within the hospital, care for the patients, do all the things that doctors and nurses and therapists, et cetera, do in healthcare. But if we don't bridge that gap between what's happening in the community with other advocates, other um, community leaders, other disciplines, then the solutions to this problem will not be as robust, as successful. So I feel healthcare plays an extremely important role in filling that gap when it comes to education, um, advocacy, and community engagement.
I completely agree with you. And I mean, I think like we're kind of proving it through this conversation that a lot of what we're doing is building this cross collaboration with each other, because we all are in spaces others of us aren't, whether like that's in the school setting or as a student or in the hospital, right? Or at the Capitol. And so I think just like, I'm pleased that we're all kind of building that network with each other, because it's important. This is a final reflection just from all of you. So each of you will get a chance to answer this. Ayan, I'll just go back to start with you. What gives you hope as we look to a new school year, and what's one action you want attendees to take away from this conversation? So Ayan, answer that one, and then Lynn, you can go next.
Okay. What gives me hope? I think the fact that it's so hard because especially on a day like today, it's like it really feels really hopeless. But I will say that, I mean, people like Nicole and I talk pretty much every day, and we do such amazing work together. And I think that is so unique of people in this space, is like, even in the face of tragedies that we face more often than we ever should have to face, we keep going every time. It would be so much easier if we gave up and we're like, this is never going to change, kids are going to keep dying, this is going to keep happening. But we have to believe that we are going to leave a better Texas, a better world for my kids, for my grandkids, for the people that come after all of us. And I think on a lot of other issues, like whether that be climate change or whatever, we're like, oh, that's the next generation's problem. We'll let them do that. Sorry, we screwed it up, but we can't do that, especially for this issue, because it's happening every single day. It's not something that's long paced. And so what gives me hope is that there's so many different people and so many different organizations that are continuing that work. And one action I want folks to take is making sure that you know what specific issues are really important to your local school district. And so whether that is secure storage information distribution to parents, and making sure that your school districts are complying with those laws, because we've seen a lot of school districts not do a lot of those things that their state required to do, and maybe not because they don't want to, just because they don't know that they have to. And so making sure that your districts are working with local organizations to distribute information about secure storage of firearms, making sure that they are talking about the intersection of secure storage and suicide prevention and things like that. So having those conversations. So I guess simply one challenge would be either email your school board and tell them to do more about gun violence, or go to a school board meeting and see what they talk about and just get into the process. That was more than 60 seconds. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Lynn, hope and an action.
Yeah, I think the hope is this is a
Nicole,
unifying
Nicole,
issue.
Oh,
Everyone has
yes.
that sense of safety.
I'm sorry
No
to step
one
in here.
wants
Is it
to
okay if I
normalize.
answer next?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Lynn, we
I'm
have
sorry. I'm
the
in the middle of
Thomas
a trauma
Virgin who's
shift, and
running.
I have to get to
Thank you.
sign out here.
Please.
I'm on.
Oh, please
Sorry
go
about that.
ahead. Hope and an action, Dr. Williams.
Yes. So I would say, like, it's easy to be angry and feel hopeless on days like today, but what gives me hope is a couple of things. One, this younger generation, Ion generation, like, they are fearless. They have a perspective on this that none of us have, and they're out there doing the work to try to make the world a better place and safer for all of us. Second, I accept that change like this sometimes moves at a glacial pace, but we have seen a lot of progress in the past, 4 or 5 years with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the Surgeon General's report on gun violence and public health crisis, the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Like those things happened after decades of no action. I recognize that they are trying to put all the, swing the pendulum the other way right now, but still, we have seen progress and we can continue to make progress if we continue to do the work. Which means on the last point, there's such a broad coalition of folks that are on board with keeping our kids safe. Even in Texas, it is nonpartisan. All this data and the surveys suggest everyone of all ages, both political parties, support doing this. And it comes down to our elected leaders who are defining the will of their constituents. So we need to continue to put pressure on them. And call to action, just start a conversation. Just continue a conversation with anyone that wants to work to keep our kids safe. We can't stop. And with that, I have to go, Nicole, but thank you for inviting me, and I hope we can do some more work together in the future. I appreciate everyone on the call.
100%. Thank you so much. I know you have to run
All
and
right.
go help people. Thank you. Lynn, I'm
Thank you,
going
Dr.
to let
Williams.
you go.
Yeah, I think really echoing a lot of what Dr. Williams and Ion said is, I have hope because this is a broadly shared issue. This is, we all want to feel safe in our communities. We all want our children to be safe. No one wants the idea of being afraid when you go to a dance, a football game, when you go to something, your workplace or your school, to have to worry about things that we have to worry about right now. So I think that's fuel for all of us. I really want people to lean into the local at the same time we're fighting those bigger fights. And I think you can lean into, as Ian said, talk to your district about how they're handling safe storage. To Dr. Williams' point about what doctors can do, my pediatrician, when my kids were young, told me to ask every single home, the parent at every single home they went to, whether they had guns and whether they were stored safely. When we start normalizing those conversations among us, that's powerful. We start saying we're a community, we need to take care of each other. And that starts by preventing accidents when your kids are small. It turns into preventing suicides or, someone who doesn't need a gun getting on a gun when our kids are older. That's powerful. That matters. Really lean into that community building, and we know, invite people to your PTA meetings, make sure you're getting to know the people at your campus community, lean hard into that. And then when you're having those conversations, turn that back around and get your school board to adopt advocacy priorities that include not only what we're doing about testing, what we're doing about local control, what we're doing about fair pay and fair funding for our campuses, but also about that safety that really includes what happens in our community comes into our schools. And we need to make sure that we have safe laws for outside our communities and in our schools, rational gun laws, and really safe laws for our communities.
Thank you. Super well said. And want to work with you on all of that. Carrie, what are your thoughts on how to keep up hope, or what gives you hope and an action?
Well, I mean, I think that so much of what I think has been said. I'm really hopeful that not only that coalitions like this exist, that like Dr. Williams said, that youth are enraged and activated because they're the ones who are going to, be our elected officials and be the change makers. So I'm so hopeful and um, feel peace that, we've got so many young people engaged. I'm also hopeful at how many we're not having this conversation at a bar by ourselves. There are 60 some odd attendees who chose to spend their Wednesday night listening to this conversation. And so there are folks who are engaged in the issue as well. And so that gives me hope. In action, I would just, encourage attendees to continue engaging and continue checking in to events like this and invite others to join. pay attention when laws are being passed, you know, register to testify, because they get tired of hearing from us, but just people who out in the community, they can't be as unkind to, they have to actually listen to you. So get involved. I mean, we, you know, for the bad bills that did pass, we were able to kill some. There was a bill that would have prevented school boards from prohibiting a school employee from just bringing a concealed weapon, and that didn't pass. There were bills that filed that would have expanded the definition of a security officer to marshal and guardian, where you know, the HB3 requirement to have a law enforcement officer could have been effectively anyone. There are conversations around the required training involved for carrying guns. And so just being involved in those conversations at the state and local level is an action. And then also just it sort of came up in several different threads of conversation tonight, just this sense of feeling detached, the community feeling detached from the schools. And so I would ask folks who have kids in schools to be creative about the way that you try to engage with the school and the teacher. And for folks who don't have kids in schools, maybe just as a community person, do the same, you know, see if you can volunteer or do one of the campus cleanup days or something like that. Just it's not as easy because all of the doors are locked and everyone's afraid, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't still keep trying to connect across the, you know, the block.
100%. And some of what you said, I mean, we're just about to wrap up, but some of what you said, Carrie, was like a perfect segue to what I was just going to talk about for a few minutes, which was some of the key policy takeaways from the session. We you know, like you said, there were some really, and Jan, you talked about this too, there were some really terrible bills that didn't make it over the finish line when it comes to guns. And so I do think that needs to be said, because people kind of like, they've seen in action for so long, and it does feel like we're just losing and only losing. But the truth is we're winning in some ways that could have been really had serious implications, right? So like things like legislation that would have allowed felons to possess firearms, some of whom have a violent history, right? There legislation that would have could have lowered the age to carry to 18. That had huge pushback. But these are bills that got hearings, right? These are bills that were discussed. There was legislation that would have allowed guns to be carried in schools, hospitals, bars, just all kinds of sensitive places. That one even got the Texas Hospital Association out in opposition, which is, you know, I know they choose carefully like what they're going to come out against, and especially when it comes to firearms. And so we were pleased to see that like it alerted people that needed to, that legislators needed to hear from. A big one that we got a lot of organizations activated around would have allowed guns to be carried in polling places. That didn't make it. And another one that we fought that we were really worried about, because it seemed to have a lot of like energy behind it from like our AG, would have prevented like major events from prohibiting firearms on their premises. It started with the whole state fair debacle, if you all followed that. And, you know, wanting to force big events like the state fair or other like, you know, major gatherings from force them to allow firearms into those spaces. And, you know, so, you know, concerts and the like. So those bills didn't pass. We have to be super vigilant next time when we anticipate them being refiled, and what we're going to do as a coalition to keep pushing back. And so we get ready for that now, right? Some of the successes, Lynn, you talked about this earlier, but really want to like always really emphasize the work we've been able to do on secure gun storage. That in 2023, we were able to get stuck into HB3, a policy to require school districts to share secure gun storage information with parents and guardians. And then this past session, we ramped that policy up to now a requirement for 3 times a year of that communication, knowing that this needs to be shared all year round, that especially like when kids are home during holidays and breaks, that those are the times where they're most vulnerable to gun access if guns aren't stored properly, and tragedies that can result. So that was really encouraging. And while we didn't get hearings on some of the bills that should have 100% been heard, like the bill to raise the age to 21 to purchase AR-15 type rifles, that the Uvalde parents have been pushing for so hard, that did not get a hearing this session, which is truly unforgivable, honestly. And there were other bills we would have loved to see being discussed in good faith, right? Like that would improve background checks and extreme risk protection orders, which, like, let's be honest, that shooting a couple weeks ago in the Target parking lot in North Austin, close to where a lot of us live, had some like major red flags with that shooter that stole 4 lives that day. And so, there's a lot more work to do just to get those bills to the first step of hearings. But Ayan's right. We had a lot of success. We had a couple of big battles we lost, which I think just need to be said, so you guys are all aware. There were several bills were approved that we opposed, but the 2 big ones I would say are SB 1362, that prohibits extreme risk protection. Did I get that number right? I have so many numbers rolling around in my head. That prohibits extreme risk protection orders, and even has implication for other states, or other states who have the red flag laws, and Texas's now unwillingness to honor those whatsoever. If an individual comes to Texas who's under an order from another state, because they have been shown to be an immediate danger to themselves or others. So lots of talk on that bill and what we can do to keep messaging that out, frankly, to the whole country. And then another bill that was legalizes short barrel firearms, which we really felt was a terrible idea. And so did the people from Santa Fe High School who were impacted by that shooting, because a very similar type of firearm was used. So that in a nutshell is where the losses and the wins for us. But I think I don't think anyone should walk away from this feeling like that it was all a wash. It certainly wasn't. Defensive work is really important here. So to everybody who played a part in that, thank you. Coming up quickly, just next steps. We have a town hall campaign going to get Texas lawmakers to pressure them and ask them to hold town halls in their communities. And so stay tuned for more on that. And then we do have a fundraiser on September 17th. And we'll be probably emailing stuff out about that, but that's at the Austin Central Library the evening of September 17th, where people can come together to support the work ahead. And I'm gonna leave y'all with that and thank our panelists. Thank you guys so much, and thanks for your patience. Oh my gosh, that was frustrating. And thanks to people who hung in with us, and for all of your perspectives and your the work that you do, that goes the seen and unseen work every day that you put in to keeping our schools and communities safer. And I look forward to continuing to work with you. And to everybody, just take good care tonight with the tragic news we all had to take in today. And stay tuned for more from us on ways that we can move ahead together.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.